RBI Governor Shaktikanta spoke about, if you want to put it in a way, taking UPI to the moon. It's a phrase I might be borrowing from Elon Musk, but he spoke about a very important trigger, and that is about UPI being allowed on feature phones. He's also spoken about how there may be a discussion paper that could be out as far as digital payments go for everything from debit cards to credit cards to UPI as well as other surcharges. Now, I know a lot of you have been waiting for that bill to be tabled in Parliament on which way the cryptocurrencies are going to go. What we do know is that the Reserve Bank of India is working on its own central digital currency. On that, what the Governor Shaktikanta Das said is, and I'm going to quote him here, have to be really careful about cybersecurity and possibility of digital frauds with regards to digital central bank currency, unquote. What does this mean? What can it mean for the rollout of the central digital rupee by the Reserve Bank of India? I'm going to be discussing that and more with Saket Modi, very well-known cybersecurity expert, runs a very successful startup as well, based out of Palo Alto. He's currently in India. Got him in Delhi before he heads out to Manali. Saket, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us here. Obviously, this is going to be a big concern for any digital currency, whether it's by a central bank or, even the cryptos, this, that, and the other. First up, what did you make of the governor's remarks? And globally, what is the trend?
Sure. Firstly, again, Nayantara, always a pleasure to be with you on the show, and thank you for having me here. Let's go to the two questions that you asked. The first piece is about what do you make of what the announcement means. I personally think it's an extremely positive announcement. There's a saying which says, nothing can stop an idea whose time has come. And I think that's how digital currency is. However, a lot of people confuse what we heard with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoins, et cetera. And there's a massive difference between the two, because you're actually talking in this case an actual fiat currency that we use on a daily basis. The only difference is it won't be physical, it will be virtual. It will have a distributed ledger technology, which in principle is what powers most of the cryptocurrencies out there. However, the places where the actual distributed ledger would be stored would not be in the personal computers of yours and mine, et cetera, which can be the case with Bitcoins, for example. If you're a miner, if you're going ahead and being a part of the whole ecosystem there, you can yourself take the entire blockchain and store it and then be a part of the entire process. That won't be the case in this scenario. When you talk about the global trends, this was a very interesting study which said more than 72% of central banks around the world are toying with the idea of CBDC, which is the central bank digital currency. And there are countries like China and a couple of others which have already started rolling it out in a controlled fashion. So I think, again, as I said, nothing stops an idea whose time has come. I think definitely going digital, going virtual, not just in the case of financial transactions, but also going in terms of any and every aspect of our lives is going to be the future. And yeah, that's how I see the trends, Nayantara.
You're going to have to also ensure more than anything else, and let's talk about all of this, right? Your digital currency, it's not going to be like a currency in your hand. It's going to be digital. That means it's going to be linked to credentials of individuals, credentials of institutions. Is that what the scare also is? Because, if you have theft and it's put up on the dark web, it'll be of individuals as well as institutions.
Yeah, the governor pointed out that there are two key issues with rolling out the digital currency. One is cybersecurity and the other is frauds. Let me double click on both of these points. The first one is on cybersecurity. Now, what does that mean? That the moment you talk about a physical note that we all carry, the authentication of the note that belongs to you is you are carrying the note in your wallet. And if you're doing that, it's assumed that it belongs to you. However, when there is a digital currency, you got to tag the right kind of person, the right kind of entity to that particular form of digital currency. And that would mean that the credentials are, because the currency is not physical, the person who will hold it will also not be physical. What do I mean by that? We all are going towards the world of the metaverse. In other words, we'll all have our own digital identities. In some shape or form, we already do that, Nayantara, today. When you have a UPI ID or when you have a net banking ID, that is your digital identity for the bank. We will have something in this case also, when you will be going ahead and having the right credentials to be able to access, transact that form of digital currency which is out there, which also becomes a issue for potential hackers to be able to hack into the actual vault where a lot of these keys will be stored, and that can be explained. For example, we know that in Bitcoins, there are 21 million Bitcoins which can be mined, out of which around 17 to 18 million of them have already been mined. However, what most people don't know about is more than 2 million Bitcoins are stolen forever, or those credentials are lost forever. In other words, that somebody who's tagged to some Bitcoins, that's a lot of money, it is gone because somebody hacked in somewhere and either they're sitting on it or at least that's not in the radar, if I can call it as in terms of transactions. So that's the first scare when you talk about cybersecurity, that systems can be hacked. Today, when you have physical currencies, the limitation of hacking the systems obviously goes drastically down. The next, obviously, scare in cybersecurity is privileged access, because unlike the distributed ledger of Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies in general, which goes to anybody and everybody, this will be a distributed ledger which will be more controlled with various financial institutions. However, there will be people of power who can see it, modify it, transact it, and do things around those lines. So there will be an issue of privileged access, which also rolls up to cybersecurity concerns. And the last, which might be slightly unusual, is also the growth of quantum computing, because most of these keys that will be generated, in the case of Bitcoins, what most people don't realize, their Bitcoin wallet ID is actually the public key of an AES-256 encryption methodology. So it's difficult to break those keys with the conventional computing power which is there, but when you go into the world of quantum computing, even the fastest supercomputers today on the planet actually are very, very easily superseded with what quantum computers can do. In other words, what I'm trying to say is the keys can be broken in a much easier way, depending on the type of encryption and the type of creation that you would do of that particular digital currency. So these would be the three key things, whether it's credential theft, privileged access, or quantum computing issues on the cybersecurity side of things. And then obviously the second point he pointed out was the frauds, which was really more around awareness, because we are a country where, unfortunately, even today, 1/3 of our population goes to bed without the second meal. So while we are enabling them with the mobile phone, and we have half of our population on smartphones now, but there is a long way to go in really enabling them to understand how that really works. And that today, I think, going to be a big challenge. And therefore, the uptick of frauds will go very, very high, because it will become much more easier to transact and move money around. Nayantara.
So how will these central digital currencies work, or any insights that you may have? Now, I would assume that a central digital currency will also be based on some kind of a blockchain technology. So to prevent that kind of a fraud or theft or hack that we just talked about, what does it mean? Like, will you need like multiple signatures on a wallet to access, two-factor authentication? Which way are central banks going?
Sure. So you asked three questions. Let me go in the same order. The first part around blockchain technology. So Nayantara, that is correct. The meaning of a distributed ledger would be a blockchain here. Let me just take even one step back and give you a 30-second primer of what is the real meaning of blockchain. Blocks which are connected to each other and form a chain, where you can see the history of transactions, is basically a blockchain. In the case of Bitcoins, you have individual blocks filled with transactions, and there are hash values of every block, which is linked to the next block. And then, that chain keeps on repeating itself, and that creates the overall blockchain. from what I see, I understand this is still early days, but what I see is this will be based on a similar technology. However, the key difference will be today in cryptocurrencies, which are very popular, the private cryptocurrencies, that blockchain can be stored by anybody and everybody like you, like me, on our laptops, on our hard disks. That won't be the case, is what I understand that is being proposed by the governor and the RBI, where you would actually have trusted financial institutions where the blockchain would be residing at, and won't be one, but there'll be multiple of those, financial services institutions which will be, involved in it. The second piece which you mentioned about, two-factor authentication or multiple keys to access. That is still, I think, we are early days because we are still at the concept stage of how this needs to work. Definitely, today when you access, the access has to happen through a mobile phone or a web platform because it's going to be digital after all. While you do that, the way you authenticate yourself, you go inside, you definitely would have at least two-factor authentication. And knowing the track record of RBI, because I have a fairly front row access to the global payments landscape. RBI, without a doubt, is one of the most toughest regulators out there, and we very proudly went ahead and enabled or mandated two-factor authentication long before the Western European side or the North American side of the world was even considering it. So considering that, I'm pretty sure there'll be multi-factor authentication. Various keys to access is like multi-factor authentication, but personal side, but more on the way you implement it on the institutional side, I would say it with a lot of keen interest on how this evolves, because I truly feel this is the future of how finance would be operated in countries around the world.
Oh, absolutely. And it's going to be so exciting to also see that when you have these central digital currencies, what is it going to mean for the payments industry? But I think that's going to have to be a far longer conversation for another day. Today, we want to talk about what the governor said about frauds as well as cybersecurity. And for that, Saket, thank you so much for taking the time out for ET Now.
Thank you, Nayantara.